This time, I'm going to talk about government failure, and that's the one that I've been asked to talk about. Government failure is essentially reasonably straightforward. What happens is that a government intervenes in a market, generally trying to improve the situation, often to correct a market failure, but that intervention either fails or is counterproductive. So, in terms of a definition, what we would argue is that government failure is a situation where the government intervenes in a market. As a result of that intervention, a misallocation of resources occurs that leads to a welfare loss. So there are a variety of kind of scenarios, a variety of potential theoretical reasons that this might take place. One is the government might use tax revenue to attempt to solve a problem. So what it attempts to do is it uses money to try and improve perhaps a market failure or some other problem, and its solution fails. So it uses money to try to achieve an end, and that money is wasted. Therefore, there is a misallocation of resources because money that could have been used elsewhere, in education and health services, is used failing to solve a problem. Secondly, what might happen is that the government intervenes to try and fix a problem, but its intervention actually makes things worse. So, in addition to not solving the problem, it actually creates, its solution actually creates, additional further problems, that mean that again, the situation is again welfare is lost. So resources are misallocated because firstly the government uses its perhaps tax revenue and so on to try and solve the problem, and not only does it fail, it also creates a deeper, further market failure. Another type of situation is where the government intervenes and perhaps succeeds in correcting the market failure, but as a result of this correction creates a new and different and perhaps worse market failure as a side effect. So in all cases what's happened is the government has intervened. As a result of that intervention, resources have been misallocated. They've gone into the wrong areas in the wrong amounts, and as a result, welfare is not as high as it could have been. There's a welfare loss, a deadweight loss, whatever you want to call it. So examples of this type of thing. Every time the government does anything, really, there's always the risk of government failure. So, one possibility, say, subsidies for green energy. It's possible that that money, simply, there was one case where basically the government subsidised, tried to get energy companies to become more carbon efficient, and all that happened is they posted people energy efficient light bulbs that nobody ever used, for example. Or it might be that the government's trying to introduce a tax, but it fails to estimate the external cost correctly, and as a result the tax is too high, creating unnecessary damage to the economy and so on. Or it might be something like the government intervening with maximum or minimum prices. In the case of minimum guaranteed prices, what we're attempting to do is often address rural poverty, to increase food supply, raise farm incomes, create security and so on. But the result has often been, take the Common Agricultural Policy, the result has often been governments being forced into a position where they're using taxpayers' money to buy up huge quantities of crops that are then chucked away that nobody wants. So again, there's a clear misallocation of resources in the sense that taxpayers' money has been used to produce something that nobody wants. Maximum prices, similarly, often introduced to try and tackle inequality, particularly rent controls in the housing market. Something the Labour Party has suggested that it's thinking about introducing if it wins the election. But in previous cases, all that's happened is that lots of people don't have houses because nobody wants to rent them anymore, and the quality of the housing stock falls. So all of those are examples of government failure. You've probably got lots more in your notes, but essentially it's often linked to market failure in the sense that the government often is intervening to try and make things better, try and improve, correct a market failure. It fails to do so, or it makes things worse, or it succeeds but